This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week, since so many players have returned to the trenches, Jonathan is taking another look at some of the World War I era weaponry of Battlefield 1.
Right, well, they've done it to me again. We've got a semi-cursed gun. It's not too bad. I could sort of picture some incredibly flamboyant Russian officer having some gold-plated, modified 1895 sniper rifle.
Make sure to subscribe and check out our previous episode on Battlefield 1, where Jonathan showcased the tiny Calibri pistol from the Royal Armouries collection. And if you like this kind of content, we've got a brand new season of Loader airing on the channel right now. New episodes will launch every Sunday, including deep dives into sniper rifles, the AK-47 and the SCAR, so make sure to keep your eyes peeled for those. Right, let's take a look at some more of the weapons of Battlefield 1.
This is something I don't remember from playing Battlefield 1. I did put in quite a few hours to this game. There are cutouts on the frame of this 1911 pistol behind the trigger, and that's to allow shorter fingers, essentially, to wrap around and reach the shorter trigger that this doesn't have. So what am I talking about? Well, this is billed as a M1911. It's actually a weird mishmash. We've got the extended safety beaver tail of an A1 by the look of it. We have the finger cutout groove things in the frame of an A1. I think I'm right in saying everything else on this is original 1911 from 1911, i.e. what you'd have in the First World War. You wouldn't have the sort of cutaway bits back then, because they are features of the 1911 A1, which came in 1926, if I remember correctly. Something else I don't remember from playing this game, the rear sight on the 1911 is really, really wide. Sights on pistols in this era were not great, not by modern standards. They were designed to be low profile and not snag on uniform or whatever. This is very, very broad. I have to assume that's similar to the enlarged rear sights on games like Call of Duty, and probably Battlefield as well, thinking about it, where you're trying to give the player a wider field of view. And because you don't have to line up your front and your rear sight, nothing's really lost except for people like me picking nits. Sudden surprise stocked 1911 pistol here, so I had to just run and grab the closest thing we have, which is this piece. It's not the same. It's not the same as what's on screen. What's on screen is very much inspired by the John Dillinger pistol. So it has a Tommy gun shaped front grip. Ours is an IRA capture. Design intended to be fully automatic with a detachable stock. It's pretty rickety. Extended magazine. And they did not go, despite the RA's fondness for the Tommy gun, they did not go for the Tommy gun shaped front grip. It's more of a broom handle. It's a bit of a mess, to be honest. Now, neither of these fit the First World War setting. This is 1970s. John Dillinger was around in the 20s, after the war, of course. So, to my knowledge, nothing like this existed in the First World War. Perhaps an obvious inclusion for a First World War set game that's trying to up the ante and include as many semi and full automatic weapons as it could. This is the Howell. This thing, the Howell, is a genuine self-loading only adaptation of the SMLE for the First World War. Did not see any significant use that I'm aware of. It's bizarre. It's, you know, the word steampunk gets bandied around with a lot of these guns. You know, they've done a great job with this. It's got an extended trench magazine, which our version does not. The only criticism I would have, I think, of the way it appears anyway, is the bipod. From memory, from our two examples that we have here, they don't have a bipod. I'm not aware of this having a bipod. I could be wrong on that. All right, the operation of this is okay, except the magazine change. We've got a major fudge on the mag change. If you're trying to do a mag change on this, we don't see the player character press the magazine catch, as far as I can tell. You can't really use your firing finger, well, you can't at all use your firing finger to press that magazine catch up. This magazine was not designed to be easily replaced. Despite the early intent with the Metford, to have a spare magazine for emergencies to swap. It was never meant to be a quick change magazine. So it's hard to reach and hard to press at the best of times. This one, as I say, is even harder. And because of the handguard here, you can't sort of brace it and get in and press efficiently to remove the magazine. You certainly can't do it with your support hand either. So you're holding it like this, braced into your armpit. You come up like this. You can just about maybe get your thumb in, but I can't get it to release. And then bearing in mind the extended mag would seriously get in your way anyway. You'd have to come in like this, press up. I won't do it because the mag might fall out. Press up hard on the catch and maybe let it fall. And then you put on a spare magazine. But this is not designed for tactical magazine changes. It would have been topped up with stripper clips. Here is the MG08/18, which is immensely heavy. So I'm going to rest it on the chair here and hope it doesn't crush me in parts you don't wish to be crushed in. Now I put the belt box on here, complete with crank. So there is an animation for cranking the belt box, which is nice. I won't try to feed this into this gun because this MG08 belt is very frayed and fragile, and I don't want to damage it any further. But when you load this thing, it's not as straightforward as the game would imply. You cannot flip up the top cover like a modern machine gun, slap the belt in place, and slap the top cover down. You have to. It's a Maxim. Feed it in with a starter tab, pull it physically across to the left while you cock the gun twice. That's the standard drill for all Maxim pattern machine guns, and we're not doing that. We're not doing that here. And you could not do it from a standing position. You'd have to put this thing on the deck and either have an assistant gunner, number two, pull the belt across for you, or realistically with a weapon like this that's modified for one man to use, you could absolutely do it and would absolutely do it on your own, but not from a standing position. It would be physically impossible to do that. This one has aircraft sights or anti-aircraft sights installed on it. This was a light machine gun. From memory, I'm not aware of an aircraft adaptation for it. However, if these are anti-aircraft sights, which seems more likely actually, then maybe. I don't remember seeing them, but hey, there's every chance that these are correct. Now think of the kind of semi-anachronistic, as in they weren't actually in use in the First World War, but they did exist, guns in this game. The Winchester 1907, probably my favourite, just because it's, I don't know, it feels like the most capable thing that you could have. 1907, of course, when it's introduced. But as you can see from the reload, which is faithfully done, you've got a magazine catch here, press with the thumb, pull out with the same hand. The animation seems to have the thumb go for the catch again. You don't need to do that, just like you don't with an AR or something. You just click it back into place. Cocking handle or charging handle at the front, which we do see operated. It's very stiff. And I think just the look of it is great. It's short, it's light, it's handy. Of course, the wooden forend on the version here has a foregrip on it. Now, there were some 1920s modifications to these for law enforcement. So the foregrip there is plausible, but wouldn't have been done until Prohibition in the States. The weird leather pouch on the front that's strapped over the barrel, don't know. That seems like it would get in the way. Worth saying, there's a lot of detail in these gun models. You know, you can see the little extractor there on the face of the bolt. It's a really nice attention to detail on basically all the guns in this game. Springfield 1903 rifle, but not any old Springfield 1903 rifle. This is fitted with the euphemistically called experimental device. One of a, relatively rare instance in this game of a name not being included. This is the Pedersen device, invented by John Pedersen. The idea was that you could carry the blowback operated semi-automatic pistol. It's a semi-automatic pistol you shove up the back of your gun, of your rifle, I should say. So that whole device would come out the back and be carried in a metal tin, and then you'd have the magazines inserted, as we're going to see in a moment. A great big blowback slide effectively on top of it. So a very distinctive look to the gun with that little magazine sticking out the side. Keep an eye out for the cutout in the receiver of the rifle. The whole point of removing this device was that you could have the ordinary rifle bolt installed for long-range accurate, well, not accurate, firing. And then when the time came to go over the top, you would swap out the two bolts effectively and go full semi automatic. So it needed a cutout in the receiver to eject the spent cartridge cases. That did not adversely affect the operation of the rifle with the ordinary bolt installed. Suppose it might let a bit more mud and water in or something, but probably not a huge issue. So you can always spot a converted 1903 for the cutout in the left side of the receiver. So that's a very nice touch indeed. We're not treating this as a separate weapon that just happens to look like a Springfield. This thing is actually being converted before our eyes, exactly as it was intended to be, into a semi-automatic pistol caliber carbine rifle thing. They've reduced the visible recoil of this thing, firing this low-powered cartridge, which is good. If anything, I think they haven't reduced it enough. If you watch the Sea and Arsenal shooting video of this, the weapon recoils very, very little. It's a very heavy steel and walnut rifle with a very weak cartridge relative to that. So it barely moved. So it's a beefier cartridge than 22, but a much heavier gun. So it kind of ends up being much the same. My old friend, the Martini-Henry, grew up watching Zulu, as I think everyone of my generation did, intrigued by this kind of middling technology. So the rifle depicted is specifically a Mark IV Martini-Henry. You can spot those due to the hump here. So as far as how well the rifle is depicted, now that we know it's a Mark IV, it's pretty good. Looks too short to me. Proportions aren't right. I think the butt length is right, but everything forward of the action body or receiver, yeah, I can't quite put my finger on that, but I don't think it's an optical illusion. I think the rifle is too short.
Feindlicher Sperr gesichtet.
Something I've noticed, I think in the game overall, but it's especially noticeable with the great honking cartridge that the Martini fires, is the relative size of the cartridge to not so much the weapon, but to the hand of the operator. They either have huge hands or the cartridge is depicted as too small. So the hands seem to be in scale with the rifle somehow, but not really with the cartridge. By this time, they've been replaced from 1894 onwards for machine guns, because the Martini was basically out of use by this point. They were made out as normal cartridge cases. So if you were using your fantasy retro Martini-Henry in the First World War, you wouldn't have the potential issue of the very weak rolled up brass cartridges. I'm not even going to complain about it being in Battlefield 1 because it is very cool. Who knows, some rogue officer might have possibly taken one to the front, but if he did, we don't know about it. Okay, I'll stop you there. We have another very heavy machine gun. In fact, literally, by some definitions, later definitions, a heavy machine gun, as in a fixed mounted machine gun, not designed by any means for carrying and operating by an individual soldier, which is what we see here. As cool as that is when it's depicted in a movie or, in this case, a game, it's completely unrealistic. And I will say impossible. If you were going to try and heft this thing and run around with it, I don't think you'd have the nice hardwood and brass belt box on there. I think you'd just let the belt down. Well, I don't know, would you? The belts are quite long, 250 rounds, something like that. I don't know. You either have additional weight and bulk, or you have a belt trailing around Rambo style. And you certainly can't hold this one-handed and hold the belt with your other hand. So not quite impossible, but not far off. We have got a number of examples of the Hotchkiss Portative, as it was called at the time. Benét-Mercié was the American name, derived from French names, of course, but it was the American Army's name for this gun. So it's it's much more plausible that you'd be finding and using one of these. Multiple nations have used it. It's an actual light machine gun, not some ridiculous heavy thing that you couldn't possibly use in this role. Having said that, it's still incredibly heavy and awkward to use, and the idea of using that from the shoulder, it's plausible with a Bren gun, but something like the Hotchkiss, it's heavy, it's awkward. The strip feed system is extremely awkward as well. It's well depicted here, I think. And of course, that gives us a nice bit of variety, a good trade-off of ammunition capacity versus a different animation, really. We don't really have the weight penalty of the belt-fed guns to worry about. But hey, it's variety, it's period, it looks good, it works well.
We have taken objective apples.
All right, this is, I think, is one of my favorite Battlefield 1 weapons because it fits their remit so well in a way that doesn't kind of push outside my comfort zone, if that makes sense to you in terms of anachronism. This thing existed. This is the Italian Cei-Rigotti. The Cei-Rigotti is well modeled. It works basically as advertised. It has a selector switch on the side. Something I picked up on looking at Wikipedia, you might remember the AS-50 incident. Well, I might have another one for you guys. This trigger that pokes through the bottom of the trigger guard. People are wondering, or have been wondering, why on earth it does that. And the answer given on Wikipedia is that this is some sort of Arctic trigger guard so that you can operate the trigger with mittens on. If I lock this thing open, how do you close the bolt? There's no bolt catch. The answer is trigger. And the reason it pokes through is that you're not pulling it far enough back to fire the gun. You're just pulling it far enough back to close the bolt. And then you can get on the trigger proper and put it all the way through to the rear and fire the rifle. That is what that feature is for. As far as the internet's concerned, that's an Arctic trigger. It isn't. It's the bolt closure device. Right, so we'll just watched a bit of, or reminded myself, because I used this a fair bit when I played the game, of how the bolt is closed in the game, and it is just manually shoved forward. Now, I understand why they thought that, but that's not how it works, as we now know. This is a strange and rare beast indeed. We don't have anything like this. Well, unless you count the Shoshat machine rifle, a light machine gun, which this is a relative of. Potentially only one of these exists. I think I've only ever seen black and white photos. So it's another classic Battlefield 1 weapon in that it existed in the time frame. Somebody could have robbed it from an experimental facility somewhere and gone to war with it, but they didn't. It really does look cool being so short and submachine gun-like. It's called a submachine gun in the game. Clearly it isn't, and by any technical definition it fires a full-power rifle cartridge. It takes the questionable open magazine design of the Shoshat machine rifle and makes it even more questionable by being even more cutaway and exposed to dirt and whatever else. Needless to say, we have no idea how well this would have worked. My guess would be not well. Right, well, they've done it to me again. We've got a semi-cursed gun. It's not too bad in the scheme of things. I could sort of picture some incredibly flamboyant Russian officer having some gold-plated, modified 1895 sniper rifle, but only really in a sort of the King's Man-esque retro futuristic setting, which I suppose is what we're in. So this thing is, it's a real rifle, of course, the 1895 Winchester. So like most of its Winchester stablemates, it's a lever action. Only the bottom drops out of it, I suppose, like other later Winchesters, with a linear bolt coming out the back. Now, not directly related to the rifle itself, but it's obviously part of the kit of the sniper. And this idea of a deployable steel shield that you poke your rifle barrel through and you have some protection from incoming fire. Absolutely correct. Those really did exist. Would you carry them around running and gunning and set them down knowing full well that the enemy knew where you were? Absolutely you would not. You would install this somewhere where the enemy weren't yet or weren't aware of you yet, and use it as a, as a sniper's tool, or you would have it on a trench parapet, again hopefully disguised, because you don't want to encourage incoming fire. What if one of those bullets could come through the loophole in the plate, and at the very least you're drawing fire to your position? Not a great idea to advertise your position, but these things had a place, they were used, and they would stop anything other than, I don't know, a very powerful big game rifle or something, depending on their construction. Right, next up, this is a fascinating one. Very unusual looking gun, I'm sure you'll agree. 9 Parabellum is correct. Now, it's hard for me to assess this because we don't have one of these. There are only 2 in existence, and one of them's complete. I believe it's at the Tula State University collection. But from the descriptions that I have read, it's pretty well represented, except that I think you would have to shove that cassette of cartridges all the way into the right so that it can then feed back across to the left and then be removed when empty. That's my reading of the very complex mechanism of this thing. So as depicted, it's an 80 round capacity. We end up with the realistic +1 if we leave a round in the chamber and replace the cassette. And that's comprised of 10 rows of 8 cartridges. Incredibly complex and frankly ill-advised mechanism. Burns through 1 stack of cartridges and then ratchets the whole thing across by 1, fires the next row, and so on and so forth. There are machine guns that do that sort of linear feed strip thing, but none that do it with vertical strips that I can think of, which makes the whole gun very tall, hence that bizarre profile, and the arrangement of the boxy receiver then dictates the bizarre buttstock and the weird grip. Really does look like a fantasy submachine gun, and in a way it kind of is, because it was never put into production, it was never used by anyone. It's one of the least plausible guns in the game in that respect, but it's kind of cool to see it kind of represented and preserved in digital form. This is another fascinating gun. This is the Sjögren, is the best approximation I can do. It's spelled SJO, but this is a Swedish word. I'm so sorry, Swedes. You speak our language so perfectly, and we don't speak yours at all. I feel very bad about that. Anyway, fascinating design. So this could easily have been consigned to the dustbin of firearms history, but made a massive comeback with, well, notably the Beretta inertial system. Totally different gun, but it uses the same principle. But essentially, it relies on the recoil of the gun. It then stops, and with a 2-part bolt with a spring in between, it's able to then unlock itself using inertia. It's so hard to explain this one, but you'll grasp it like I did when you watch the animation. All right, everyone, thank you for watching. Those were more guns from Battlefield 1. Been a while since we did the first episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. As always, if you'd like to check out our own Royal Armouries YouTube channel featuring yours truly and some colleagues as well, please do that. And we have our own social media accounts, of course. 3 sites here in the UK that you can visit if you're able to visit. Details of that and events and everything else on the website. Thanks again. We'll see you again next time.